Okay, today's video is gonna be helpful whether you live in Idaho or whether you live in any state across the country, because everyone who owns a home is asking the same question. What's the cost of waiting when it comes to selling versus buying a home? Now, if you're in California, if you're in any other state, you probably are wondering the same thing. If I sell now and buy now, even though the rate's higher, is it gonna be worth it? But let's go ahead and connect with Wendy, see what she's feeling with her clients and kind of the conversation she's having. And then I'm gonna introduce you to our lender who's gonna really kind of show you everything and answer a lot of questions for you. But first, my name is Greg Langham. I'm an associate broker here in the Boise, Idaho area. So if you're thinking about coming to the Idaho market, pick up the phone, give me a call, shoot me a text, or send me an email so that we can connect and put a game plan together that's right for you. All right, so caught up with Wendy. We're on our way to the lender's office to show you some numbers. But, Wendy, what are your clients saying as, you're talking with them, both sellers and buyers?
Yeah, I think a lot of our clients are I feel like they're always waiting. They're always waiting they're watching the market, which is super smart. It's good to watch the market. They're waiting for interest rates to drop. They're waiting for house prices to drop. But again, that is a good thing to do, to be aware of. But at the same time, a lot of times we miss out on things when we wait around.
That's true. Yeah, so many people are trying to time the market, be like, okay, I'm going to buy when the rate goes to here, or I'm not going to sell because the rate is here. I think a lot of people can miss some good homes in great neighborhoods.
Yeah, and honestly, a lot of people are just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like, they're waiting for a big crash, and honestly, we just haven't seen that. We continue to see demand. We continue to see large corporations and companies coming here, which is going to bring more jobs. It's going to bring more people. So we don't see a lot of prices really. There's, of course, ebbs and flows in all markets, but we're not really seeing a crash.
No, and I have been waiting for that crash. At least, I think back in 2012, everyone was saying that the market was going to crash, but it just kept going and going and going. But I think one thing that people forget about is when the market crashes, it's usually affects their job, their income. Only a handful of people have like dry powder to be able to go and pick up a short sale or foreclosure out of cash.
Yeah, because if there is a crash, let's say nationwide, and their home crashes that they're going to sell, it all kind of evens out. Yeah, so, it's spring, so it's starting to hop now. Everyone starts to get a little more excited about spring. But there are people that still kind of just want to wait. They want to wait and watch the market, watch to see if the prices go down, watch the interest rates, which is smart. It's really important to do those things. But also, there is a cost to waiting.
Definitely, yeah. And I don't think people really factor that in. I'm excited to show everyone kind of what that looks like, because I don't think a lot of people realize how costly it is to wait.
Exactly. So, Greg, don't you have some sellers that are kind of in that holding pattern right now? Aren't they waiting?
Yes, so I've got two great clients of mine who really they reached out to me to get their house listed and sold, and I ran the value for them, and they have great equity in it. But then they're looking at the cost of purchasing a home and wondering, like, is it better just to kind of sit tight and wait for that equity to build a little bit more so they could put more down and keep their payment lower on a new place? Or do they just pull the trigger right now and just buy? Mm-hmm. So they're kind of debating on that, on what to do. So I know that there's a lot of people out there in our market, probably in your market, wherever you're watching this, and maybe you're in the same boat thinking, gosh, I'd love to get to Idaho, or I'd love to sell my home in Idaho, move to another place. I've got equity, but the cost to purchase seems very high with the interest rates. So yeah, people are having those conversations right around the kitchen table right now, especially as we go into that spring market. So it's just one of those things where I hope this video is educational for people to kind of look at the whole picture and be like, okay, what is the true cost of waiting for a home?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm here at Bill Zimmerman's office. He's the mortgage lender that's gonna walk us through that cost of waiting versus buying now and selling. So let's go in and introduce you to Bill. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Greg.
How are you, man?
Good to see you.
Good. This is Bill Zimmerman. He's with Summit Mortgage here in the Treasure Valley. Bill, how long have you been doing mortgages?
Long time, since 1996. So yeah, I've been in the business that long. I've been in the Treasure Valley since 98 and with Summit since 2008.
All right, cool. So the video topic that we're discussing with everyone is like the cost of waiting. Like how much does it cost to wait versus either sell and buy and all that stuff? So that's, I don't know. You said you had some answers for us.
Right. Well, I hear this a lot, from, well, not every client, but a number of people. They'll come to me and say, hey, I really want to buy a house. I think the timing's right, but the rates are too high. I want to wait for rates to come down. It's too expensive right now. So I want to wait for rates to be in the 5s or whatever they say, 4s, before I get excited about buying a house. And so I've got a program I put together that I have access to that really goes through the numbers and drills down and says, okay, if you waited 6 months, let's say the rates dropped to 0.5% in 6 months, or you waited a year and they dropped to 1%, or 2 years and they've dropped 2% down into the 4s, would you really be better off, waiting a year or two to buy, or do the numbers really spell out a different story and explain a different story? And in most cases they do. So it's really interesting to go through that.
Yeah, I shared, because I have some clients right now who are kind of at the kitchen table looking at their home valuation that we provide for them, the equity they have, but then the cost of rates and deciding like, should I or shouldn't I? So you're thinking that this might answer some questions?
It would definitely answer questions, yeah. and so they're not out there kind of hoping and wishing and dreaming and don't really have numbers to back up. People need to give themselves permission to make decisions. And so this program really helps people say, okay, I now have permission. I give myself permission to make the decision to move forward and buy a house, even though interest rates are 6.5 or 7 or whatever they are, because of my stage in life and where I think things are going, and what we think is going to happen conservatively with appreciation in this market, in the Treasure Valley market, right? Wow. That's part of the equation.
Yeah. So, well, I'm excited to check it out. I'm excited for you guys to see it. So let's do some work.
All right, we'll dig in. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to sit down and crunch some numbers. So I'm going to go through a real life example, walking you through a $500,000 purchase price somewhere in Meridian area and 5% down, and go through the numbers so you can see what it would actually cost to wait to buy this, waiting for interest rates to come down, and walk you through every number so it makes sense. Okay, so as I mentioned a minute ago, here's a cost of waiting analysis on a $500,000 home, let's say in Meridian. And I'm just going to walk you through the numbers so you can see how this program works and how it can help you to make a more informed decision on whether you should wait or not for interest rates to come down. So I used a $500,000 home, let's say Meridian or what have you, with a few different scenarios. Waiting 6 months from now to buy, waiting a year and a half, or waiting 2 years. So the assumptions here are that homes are going to continue to appreciate, right? And what I've used is historical appreciation from CoreLogic and other data sources to come up with an actual appreciation number that might make sense going forward. So the assumptions of all the experts out there, the economic experts in real estate for this area specifically from Meridian, Boise, is that we should see roughly 4%, a little over 4% appreciation per year going forward for the next 5 years. And that's been the historical average going backwards. Now we had a huge bump, right? Much higher than that a few years ago, right after COVID, but that has settled down now to about 4%. So assuming those numbers are correct, and if you don't agree with that, by the way, I have the ability to change this in my program. So I can change it to 2% or 3% or whatever, or 5% if you think it's going to be higher. But just going off of the data, about 4% would be about 2% roughly every 6 months. So if you waited 6 months, your home value would be higher, right? Be about 510, and then a year you'd be at 521, and a year and a half you'd be at 532, and 2 years you'd be at 543. I assumed a loan amount of just 5% down, so that would be a typical 30-year fixed conventional loan requires 5% down minimum on a normal loan, right? So that you have as low as possible on the mortgage insurance with as little as possible out of pocket for down payment. That's 5%. 30-year term here, you can see the down payment here about $25,000, but that would be a little bit more every 6 months or every year as your home appreciates, as the prices go up in value. So $25,000 would turn to $27,000  2 years from now. We're starting out at 6.5%. And assuming the rate drops 0.5% every 6 months, which is never that linear, it's never that regular, but let's assume that happens. We're down to, let's say 4.5% 2 years from now, which everybody would love to see. And who knows, we might actually see that. We'll see what happens with the economy, et cetera, as we move forward with this new administration and such. But this gives you an idea of what I've used. I've also used 1 point in here. Let's say you bought it down with a point. So you're like, okay, but I spent money to get that rate. Is that still going to be worth it? So I assume that you still spend a point, which is pretty normal. Most people spend roughly a point. Some do 0.5%, whatever. Some do none, but that seems to be the average to get a rate that's a little bit lower, because most people don't anticipate refinancing, right away. They think it'll be a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years before rates are low enough to refinance. Then you can see the rest of this is all fixed rate. There's no prepayment penalties, straightforward 30-year loan. Shows your principal and interest payments on average, and your total expenses, if you include taxes and insurance in there, what your total payment would be, okay, going forward. Shows roughly what closing costs are. They're usually typically a little less than that, but I rounded up a little bit. And then prepaid escrows, where we have to collect a few months of taxes and homeowners insurance on the front end to close the loan. That's very typical. Happens with every loan program where you have your taxes and insurance included as part of your payment. So then it shows your total cash to close, right? Assuming the sellers aren't contributing. Now, don't get discouraged by that number if you're like, yeah, but I thought it was only $25,000 on a $500,000 house. That's true, and most of the time you can actually have the seller negotiate, or your realtor in this case. The Go Idaho team, they're fantastic at this, Greg and his team, at negotiating with sellers to have them pay for your closing costs and prepaid escrows and roll that into the mortgage or into the purchase price. So they cover that for you. So is your cash close necessarily going to be $35,000, $36,000? No, it could be quite a bit lower than that with the right agent on your team. And these guys at Go Idaho are fantastic. So I encourage you to follow their lead. So let's look at the results. Those are the details. Those are the numbers. The results would look like this. If you bought now versus waiting 2 years, you would be about $30,000 ahead. So you're looking at it going, okay, how is that possible? If rates drop 2%, well, the appreciation gain is the largest chunk of that, right? So you'd have appreciation gain of about over $40,000. You would be spending over $8,000 more in payments over 2 years because your rate's higher than if you waited for 4.5%. So yes, you're right. Your payments would be higher. You'd be spending more on that. But, and you'd also have to pay to refinance to get a lower interest rate later, $5,000. So I've calculated that in there as well, saying, let's say roughly it costs $5,000 to refinance to get a lower rate a few years from now. Is it still worth it? And even factoring that in, yes, it's still worth it, including the higher payments for those 2 years. You're still ahead by $30,000. This, of course, is the chart, shows you what that looks like over time. So hope that helps, hope that makes sense. If you have a specific scenario and you'd like to run it a little bit differently, with say different appreciation numbers or different purchase price or different down payment, let me know. I'm happy to run it for you specifically. I hope this is really helpful to you, and hope to hear from you at some point in the near future. So I hope that was helpful, that you got some information that maybe you hadn't thought about before, gave you some numbers to think about. Maybe you give yourself permission to move forward if you're one of those that was kind of waiting, that's been waiting for interest rates to fall before you make a decision to buy a house, but you know you need to buy. I hope this helped you out a lot. If you know others who might be interested in this information, or you know would be helped by seeing this, please let me know. I mean, reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram at @TheBillZimmerman. You can give me a call at 208-939-0002, but I'm here at Summit Mortgage Corporation. Find me online or through Go Idaho team, and happy to help you out. At any rate, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Would love to visit with you and help you through kind of the thought process on buying a house now versus waiting. Thanks.
All right, that information was so great. Thank you so much, Bill. And by all means, we're going to put his information down below in the description of this video as well if you want to connect. But Wendy, I think that answered a lot of our buyers' questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think really a lot of people want to wait, but it's really maybe not the best thing to do in certain situations.
Well, from that, I definitely agree with you on that. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm ready to make the move to Boise, Idaho, pick up the phone, give us a call, shoot us a text. Wendy and I and the Go Idaho team would love to help you out.